What do you do when the life you are living does not look like the life you saw or the dream or the vision that God placed in your heart? What do you do when you know there's more in you, but your current reality keeps reminding you of everything that hasn't happened yet? You saw the dream, you saw the vision, you prayed about it. You felt God stirring something deep inside of you. You started believing that your life can be more than just survival, more than just a routine, more than just getting through the week. But then you looked around and you said, hey, why am I still here? Still that same job, still in that same season, still trying to figure out the same things. Still waiting on clarity for what's next, still wondering if you missed it, still wondering if you've delayed it, still wondering if you've ruined it or imagined up the whole thing. Today we're talking about the gap, the space between what God showed you and what you're currently living. The gap may be where God is building the person who can carry and steward well the vision and the calling that He has assigned to you. Welcome to Beyond the Dream with Erica J. Fields. This is a space where we talk about faith, calling, purpose, building, becoming, and what it really looks like to move from vision to obedience. Not just dreaming about the life that God has placed in your heart, but actually becoming the kind of person who can steward it. Because I believe there are people listening who don't just need another motivational quote. You need language for the season you're in. You need honesty and faith. You need strategy. And maybe most of all, you need to know that you're not crazy for wanting more while still being faithful where you are. So today we're starting with the gap. I know what it feels like to live in the gap. I know what it feels like to have a vision for your life that feels so clear one moment and then wonder how it's all supposed to happen in the next. I know what it feels like to be gifted and called, educated, experienced, faithful, accomplished even, and still feel like you're not fully walking in what you know is in you. I know what it feels like to have all of that and somehow feel like you're not fulfilling all of what God has assigned to your hands. And that tension can be hard sometimes to explain because from the outside, you look fine. You're showing up, you're doing everyday life, you're responsible, you're doing your job, you're excelling, and you're serving people and even encouraging everybody else. But inwardly, there's this ache, not because you're ungrateful, not because you are impatient, not because you think you're better than where you are, but because something inside of you knows that this is not what God showed me. This is not the fullness of what He showed me. And that is a very specific kind of tension because the gap can make you question everything. Did I hear God right? Am I behind? Am I too late? Should I be doing more? Should I be waiting? Should I be preparing? Should I be content with where I am? Should I be uncomfortable and just settle where I am? Sometimes the hardest part is that both things can be true. That you can be grateful and still desire more. That you can be faithful and still be frustrated by where you are. You can be planted and still feel like there's a pull towards something else. You can love where you are and still know and understand that you can't stay forever. That's the gap. The gap is the space between revelation and manifestation. It's the space between what God showed you and what you currently have no evidence to prove. It's the space between the dream in your heart and the evidence in your life. And most of us, we don't struggle when the dream is fresh, when the vision is fresh. We're excited. We're writing notes. We're making plans. We're saving quotes and ideas. We're telling ourselves, this is my season and the time is now. But what happens when the time passes? What happens when the door doesn't open as quickly as we thought it would? What happens when the opportunity doesn't come, the door is slammed in your face? What happens when the job is still that same job? When the bills are still those same bills, when the support is limited, the resources still don't match the vision? That's where the real work begins, because the gap will test the foundation that your dream is built on. The gap looks different for everybody. For one person, that gap may look like being in a 9-to-5 while carrying a dream they haven't started yet. For another, it's owning a business, leading the team, raising the family, and still sensing God is stretching you to another level. For someone else, that gap may look like public success, but private battles. It may look like having accomplished what you once prayed for, but now realizing there's another level of healing and obedience and courage, leadership or surrender that God is requiring for what's next. So when I say the gap, I'm not just talking about the person who feels stuck at the starting line. I'm also talking to that person who has started and now is being stretched. I'm also talking to the person who has built something but knows God is asking them to build differently. I'm talking to the person who looks successful on paper but feels a tension on the inside, because the gap is not always about lack. Sometimes the gap is about capacity. Sometimes that gap is about healing. Sometimes the gap is about alignment. Sometimes the gap is about the next level of obedience, giving God your next yes. And sometimes the gap is simply this, that God has already done some great things in your life, but He is not finished yet. See, the gap will reveal what you believe, not what you say you believe when everything is exciting. Not what you post, not what you declare when the music is playing and you feel all inspired. The gap reveals what you believe when nothing appears to be changing. Habakkuk reminds us that for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. That means there can be real vision and still be an appointed time in the future. There can be a God-given dream and still be a waiting season. There can be purpose on your life and still be a process attached to it. This is where many of us get discouraged, because we assume if God said it, it needs to happen suddenly. But sometimes God gives us the vision before He gives us the vehicle to get there. He gives us the picture before He gives us the pathway. He gives us the burden for a thing before He gives us the blueprint. And that space, it's in that space we have to decide, do I still trust God when I can't trace the timeline? Do I still believe that the dream matters when nobody else sees it? Will I still obey it when things are small, when the doors haven't opened up yet? Because the gap will expose where our faith is rooted when there is no visible progress. Sometimes we think we're trusting God, but we're really trusting the momentum that we can trace. We're trusting feedback and numbers and applause. We're trusting how fast things seem to be moving. But what happens when there is no applause? When the numbers are small? When it happens that nobody is clapping, nobody is supporting, nobody believes with you? What happens when you're building quietly? That's when the gap starts asking, what do you really believe? And we have to get to a place where we declare that though the vision tarry, I will wait for it because it will come to pass. It will happen. We have to declare in the face of doubt and fear that I trust God. I trust what he said. I trust what he showed me. I trust what he promised. Because listen, there is no wasted time in the gap. The gap is not wasted time. It may feel slow, but slow does not mean wasted. It may feel hidden, but hidden does not mean forgotten. It may feel like nothing is happening. But formation, development happens beneath the surface. Let's think about David in the Bible. David was anointed to be king, but he didn't become king the next day. There was a gap. And in the gap, he served and he fought battles and he developed courage. He learned leadership. He learned to depend on God and trust him. He learned how to handle pressure. David learned how to survive rejection. See, the oil was real. The anointing was real, but it came with a process. And I wonder how many of us have had the dream, but we resent the development required to carry it. We want the platform, but God is working on our character. We want the opportunity, but God is working on our capacity. We want that open door, but God is working on our foundation. We want the promise, but God is working on us as a person. And that may not be what we want to hear because in the gap, we can get tired. And sometimes we're saying to God, I've been learning lessons for a long time. I've been facing the challenges and the obstacles for the long time. When can we move from this waiting to manifestation and fulfillment? But what if the gap is not something God is withholding from you? What if it's what he's using to prepare you? Where he is teaching you to learn and build without constant validation? What if the gap is where you find your voice? What if the gap is where you heal from the version of you that would mishandle the vision and the dream? What if the gap is where God shows you your identity? The gap is not wasted time when God is using it to form us. Because here's what we learn in Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. You got a purpose. You got a vision. You got a dream from God and you love him. He's using every part of your story. Nothing is wasted. Your process in the gap is preparing you to walk into the reality of the dream and the vision that God has assigned to you. The gap requires stewardship. When life does not look like the dream yet, it's easy to do one of two things. Either you sit still and say, well, I'm just going to wait on God. Or you panic, you get anxiety, and you try to force everything open. But faithfulness in the gap is neither passivity or panic. Listen, it is stewardship. It's asking God, what do you have that you placed in my hands now to do? Not what do I wish I had, not what do I think I need before I get started, not what do other people have that I don't have, but what's in my hands right now that I can do something with. Because sometimes we are so focused on the dream that's way out there that we neglect the assignment that's right in front of us. You may not have the full business yet or the strategy for what's next, but you can start learning. You may not have the full platform yet, but you can start creating the content. You may not have a full community yet, but you can start serving a few. You may not have the full financial freedom, but you can start stewarding your money differently. You may not have full clarity yet, but you can still take the next obedient step. Because stewardship says, I may not be where I want to be or where God showed me yet, but I'm going to be faithful right where I am. And that matters because the dream is not built when the big doors open. The dream is built in small acts of obedience. The dream is built in consistency. The dream is built in the habits that nobody sees. The dream is built in the prayers you keep praying. The dream is built in the healing work you keep doing. That dream is built in how you show up when things look small. Here's what Zechariah 4:10 reminds us. Do not despise the small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Hear that. The Lord rejoices to see the work begin. He rejoices to see you take the first step. He rejoices in your yes. He rejoices in your consistency. God rejoices in your faithfulness. And maybe that's a word for somebody today, to stop despising small beginnings. Stop despising a small audience, a small step, or the quiet season. Stop despising the thing that doesn't look impressive yet, because small doesn't mean insignificant. Small may be the seed that God has planted on the inside of you. And if you mishandle the seed because it does not look like the harvest, you may miss what God is trying to grow in and through you. So here are 3 things you can do in the gap. First, name the gap honestly. Stop pretending you are fine when you're frustrated. Tell God the truth. God, I believe you, but I'm tired. God, I trust you, but I'm confused. God, I know you called me, but I don't know what to do next. That's not a lack of faith. That's building conversation, relationship, and intimacy with God. You cannot surrender what you refuse to name to him. Second, identify what's actually in your hands. Ask yourself, what skill can I develop right now? What relationship can I nurture right now? What system can I build right now? What habit can I strengthen right now? What idea can I test right now? What act of obedience have I been delaying? Because the gap becomes dangerous when we treat it like it's a holding space instead of a training ground. Third, take one faithful step. Not 10, not the whole plan, but one step. Record that episode. Write the outline. Start the savings account. Send that email. Make that call. Clean the space or the room. Update the resume. Create the offer. Pray again. Try again. Try again. Try again. Move again, because clarity often comes while you're moving. You may not get the whole staircase, but you can take the next step. So I want you to sit with the next few questions this week. Where is the gap between what I believe, what you believe, God showed you, and what you're currently living? What has the gap been revealing about your faith, your fears, or your foundation? What have you been saying, I'm waiting on God to, that may actually be a delayed obedience? What is the one thing that you already have in your hands that you need to steward better? What is one step that you could take this week that agrees with what God showed you instead of doubt and fear? And I know the gap can sometimes feel painful. It can feel confusing and discouraging. And I know what it feels like to carry something that hasn't fully become visible yet. But I need you to hear me. You're not behind. You're not forgotten just because it's taking some time to get there. You're not disqualified because your current life doesn't yet match the vision or dream that God placed in your heart. The gap is real, but so is God's faithfulness. And if he gave you the vision, he knows how to develop you for it. So this week, don't despise the gap. Pay attention to it. Ask what God is forming in you. Ask what he's healing in you. Ask what he's asking you to steward better right now, because the gap is not the place where your dreams and visions die. The gap is where builders are born. So if this episode spoke to you today, like, subscribe, share it with somebody who's living in the gap between where they are and what they believe God has shown them for their life. And I want you to comment and tell me, what is your gap? What are you building? Because this is exactly why Beyond the Dream exists. We're not just dreaming, we are healing, we are building, we are becoming, and we're moving forward in faith. So join the email list so you'll get all the updates and notifications. I'm Erica J. Fields, and this is Beyond the Dream. I'll see you next time.